Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, coming to you once again from beautiful Irving, Texas. I mean, beautiful. Look at this lovely riverside view I'm walking alongside of. It's just wonderful. And of course, Texas being deep red, I get to meet some equally wonderful members of our online community. I just met a wonderful fellow by the name of Peter. Peter originally lived in the UK. We had a nice long chat. He's been living in the States for a number of years now, but he was up north and he just recently moved down here in Texas. And he said, you know something, Dr. Steve, if you look around, you're going to notice something you don't see in a city in Texas. And that is, of course, pride flags, LGBT flags, and BLM flags. They're not here. The only flags you see in Texas is the American flag and Texas flags. It's absolutely wonderful. But we've got some, unfortunately, very sad development happening, or very dangerous development happening in Israel with the invasion of Hamas into Israel. You probably have gotten reports here. They're estimating about 2,500 rockets were sent into Israel from Hamas. They hit Israel, both land, sea, and air. Hundreds of people have been killed. And then we're also seeing a number of settlements having been taken over by Hamas militant troops. Israel's obviously caught dramatically by surprise, caught off guard. They have no idea what happened, as it were. And so they're promising massive retaliation. Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, is promising to strike back with such force the world is going to be utterly shocked to see. So obviously this is going to be playing out for the foreseeable future. The question is what's really happening? What's actually going on here with this Hamas attack of Israel? Well, I think there are a couple of different dynamics that are happening, but they both unite around a common meta dynamic that we talk a lot about called re-territorialization. And you're going to see a lot of these kinds of conflicts happening at both levels involving re-territorialization. So what does all of that mean? Well, re-territorialization is the localization of political decision-making as the result of the breakup of globalism. So the more globalism and globalist forces which centralize, by definition, they take political decision-making out of the hands of the local and centralize them in the hands of the managerial a managerial elite, very much like what we're seeing, for example, in Brussels. So nations in Europe, they find they're so frustrated because they don't get to make their own political decisions. So many of those decisions are being made in a city far, far away, in a whole different country, by people they didn't even elect. Heck, they can't even pronounce half their names. And so as globalism begins to wane, more and more political power and decision-making is coming back to the local. And so what is happening around the world is we're seeing more and more populations basically rebel and try to kick out the last vestiges of this globalist system from their local decision-making. So of course, we've been seeing this big time in the Sahel region in Africa, where countries like Gabon and Niger and Burkina Faso, they're now kicking out the last vestiges of French colonialism in their nation. Well, that's very similar to what we're seeing here. If you go to the Palestinian sites that I've been going to that are really championing this invasion, that's exactly what they're saying. They're tapping into those radically localized sentiments of we need to kick out the foreign invaders. We need to kick out the imperialists, the colonialists, and that's kicking out the Israelis from Palestinian land. The problem, unlike Gabon or Niger or Burkina Faso, the problem is that there is no way Hamas could even remotely compete with the military superiority of Israel. They're going to get crushed. Make no mistake on that. Israel's going to hit back, and they're going to hit back hard. So what else? There's got to be something else going on here, because that would seem counterintuitive. What's the point of trying to get back your land when if anything, they may even take more land back, and as part of their retaliation? Well, that brings us to a higher level, a more geopolitical level of this reterritorialization. You see, what's happening in the Middle Eastern region as a whole, probably one of the most significant events of what's happening there, is the announcement of a path towards normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Okay, so Saudi Arabia is obviously led by Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia de facto represents the global Sunni population, which is 85% of Islam. And so this path towards normalization would in effect reconcile Israel with 85% of the world's Muslim population, right? Again, through representation of Mohammed bin Salman. But Mohammed bin Salman has said over and over again, the one hang-up to this normalization is Palestine. It's the Palestinian issue. That's the one thing that is thwarting full reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So if you wanted to sabotage that normalization, that reconciliation, what do? You blow up the Palestinian situation. That's how you'll do it. That'll be the one thing that would trigger a total breakdown in this path towards normalization. So who would want to do that? Well, obviously the Palestinians would. The Palestinians aren't interested in being normalized out of the picture, as it were, the international picture. And the other 15% of Muslims out there who are the Shiites. And that would be, and I know you have the Sufis as well. I don't mean to mean, but geopolitically we're talking about. And so who are the de facto leaders of the Shiite Muslim global population? And that, of course, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran does not want Israel and Saudi Arabia reconciling. They don't want normalization. And so it would seem, but there's a problem there. They can't thwart it themselves because they've reconciled with Saudi Arabia. Remember, China brokered a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran just a few months back. So Iran can't, back in the day, Iran could try to thwart Saudi Arabia all they wanted directly because they were basically enemies. Well, those days are gone. They're friends now, and they're both part of BRICS, right? They're part of the three nations, along with the United Arab Emirates, to be brought into this new G20, sort of counter G20 alliance. And so the only way they could blow up this deal is by encouraging Hamas to do something to bring the Palestinian conflict issue back on the front page. And it's very interesting because Hamas would never have done this without the green light from Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the Shiite party in Lebanon, and Hezbollah would never have given them the green light if it weren't for Iran. So I think you could draw a straight line between what happened with Hamas and bring it all the way back to Iran. And why is Iran so dead set against all this when all said and done? They're dead set against this precisely because they see Israel as simply a proxy for US power and influence in the region. So this is where you're starting to see this re-territorialization happening, but at a bigger geopolitical level. Iran does not want US influence and power in their region. They want to play the hegemon, or at least a major political economic player in that region. And the United States, particularly via their sanctions, is thwarting that. They're sabotaging that. So Iran wants to make sure the United States' power and influence is radically limited in that region and pushed out. And they do that by making sure that Israel's influence and power in the region remains limited. And so a rapprochement, a reconciliation, a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is not something that Iran wants to see. And so this Hamas invasion would seem to be the one event that would destroy any hope of that normalization coming to pass, and would therefore thwart any increase of US influence and power in what Iran considers to be its regional sphere. So that's what I think we're ultimately seeing there, gang. So obviously we'll keep an eye on how things develop. It's beautiful here in Irving, Texas, but it's certainly dangerous in a tumultuous and unraveling world, no question. Love you all. God bless.